Try and remember the last time you tried something completely new, like something you'd never done before in your entire life, but you'd always wanted to try and then you finally got around to doing it. It's always a little bit scary the first time of doing something. Do you know what I mean? I remember reading a book. This was maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I was living in China at the time, and when you live in China, at least on the outskirts of Beijing and Shanghai, the tube journey to get into the city where things kind of happen is usually pretty long. China's a very big place. So you're probably thinking about like 40, 50 minutes every time you go into the city and then back as well. So it's like 40 minutes there and then 40 minutes back, minimum. So I used to listen to audiobooks all the time. I used to get through a fair amount of audiobooks during my time of living in China, which is like 1.5, 2 years. And one book that I read, which literally changed, like, I know there's that whole like thing of, oh, this book changed my life, or, you know, I'm finding myself, blah, blah, blah. But this book was a book which I just stumbled across. Like, I can't even remember how I found it. It isn't a super popular book, at least at the time it wasn't. And it's just a book that I kind of stumbled across called The Surrender Experiment by a guy called Michael A. Singer. One of, like, I cannot think of a book which has impacted my life in a more positive way. And also everyone that I've actually told about this book has literally said the exact same thing. I can't think of another book that's actually helped to shift my perspective and shift my worldview more than that book. And you know, I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it definitely helped. Because if you've never heard of the book, it's simply about this guy. It's actually a story about Michael A. Singer, if I remember correctly, where he basically talks about how he had this job that he wasn't 100% happy with and he wanted to do something new. So he moves to the forest and he just builds himself a house. He's never built a house before, but he just figures it out and he just tries this brand new thing and just builds a house from scratch in the woods, right? Which sounds absolutely nuts, right? It sounds crazy, but he does it. So he builds this house, this beautiful house, and over time, he starts to get other people asking him, can you build my house? Can you build me a house like that? And what he finds is he actually starts to, you know, build other people's houses, and all of a sudden he has a business on his hands. So he's went from working this job, then essentially retiring, or kind of just, I don't even know what he was doing. I can't even remember, it was so long ago. It was like 6 years ago when I read the book. But he goes from working in this job to building this house to then building other people's houses, which then leads to somehow him, by the end of the book, being the CEO of this like massive tech company, like multi-$100 million tech company. And there's tons of little milestones along the way, but the whole story is just crazy. But the overarching lesson of the story is to just go with the flow, and if something feels right, then let it be. And if it doesn't happen, then you're just surrendering to the will of the world ultimately. That's kind of the overarching lesson from the book, or at least what I took back then. And that was kind of the philosophy that I took to life and trying new things going forward. So if I go back to how I actually became a branding consultant, I didn't go to university. I didn't, do the traditional route of, kind of working in an actual agency for a long period of time before actually going off on my own. Thinking back, I actually did things in the opposite way. I actually got a job at a branding agency before I even went to university by just working there for free. I got a job there by literally hounding them until they actually gave me a job, then worked for free whilst I worked in a bar. And then eventually I started my own brand because I thought, okay, instead of just reading about theory, which sounds like the most boring thing in the world, and I actually hate reading, to be completely brutally honest with you, why don't I just actually start a brand of my own and then learn all of the challenges that a brand would normally face when they're starting up, and then I can teach them how I overcame them. So I started my first brand, and then I eventually started working with companies. Now today I'm working with companies, big and small, companies that you've probably never heard of and companies that you've definitely heard of, and I've been doing this for the last decade, all because I took that first leap. I just went with it. And I actually think that the philosophy that is actually taught in the Surrender Experiment is actually super powerful, because there's not many times when someone will just give you something in this world. Like there's some times where, the stars just align and you just find yourself in a position where you're like, man, like how did I actually end up here? Because something's handed to you, but it never really happened. You have to put yourself in that position. Now, I don't want to turn this into some bullshit, motivational video, because it's just not like that. And I kind of got over the whole, Gary Vee approach, probably like 10 years ago. But I do want to just talk about that first leap and the philosophy and the thought process that goes through my mind when I'm in a position where I'm thinking about doing something new and I feel that it's a little bit daunting. I feel like it's a little bit scary and I maybe don't have the confidence in that moment to say, just do it, right? And that philosophy and that idea is, and the question that I always ask myself, if I look forward to when I'm 80 years old and I'm rocking in my rocking chair and I've had my life. My life is done, right? I'm on my last legs. Should I do this thing or not? Will that person regret not doing this thing? And I've used that exact same question many times over the past few years, especially when I, first started doing jiu-jitsu, for example. It's kind of scary rolling around with big sweaty guys and, getting submitted and choked and stuff. It's not exactly the most ideal way to spend your Tuesday afternoon, you would think. But then when you actually get in there, you become addicted to it and you love it. And all of a sudden you're doing it every single night of the week, or as many nights as your body will let you, because you do eat quite a lot when you do jiu-jitsu, right? So that difference between this scary, daunting feeling that you have where you're kind of anxious about starting something new, think about how many times you've tried something new and then afterwards you really appreciate it. You've really appreciated that you had the confidence to actually take that step and try that thing and invest in that thing, or do that thing, or fly to that country that you've never been to before by yourself, just experience the culture, and then you've met people there and you've had a great time. Or doing that course that has ended up leading to a new career, or meeting someone there, or there's so many experiences that we are yet to experience and do are going to add so much value to our lives. And I think that if you take the same approach as Michael A. Singer, like in the Surrender Experiment, and just let things flow, just if you feel a little bit, that's fine. Like, life is all about that. Life is all about, if you're succeeding more than you're feeling, I honestly think you're doing it wrong. Like, seriously. Because if you're succeeding most of the time, then you're not actually pushing yourself outside your comfort zone. Live how you want to live. But I feel like the more moments that you have, where you have those leaps of faith, where you just try something different, just do it. And that message of, what would 90-year-old me do, rocking in that rocking chair, thinking, when I was 33, I had the chance to do that thing, and I didn't do it. Imagine sitting there in a rocking chair and thinking about that, not being able to go back and do it. Just think about that, man. It's painful. I can actually feel my own pain now. 45 years into the future, my math is terrible. What's that, 57 years into the future. It's horrible. I remember listening to Tucker Carlson, and he was talking about having as many kids as possible, and buying that big house that you can't afford yet, and trying that career that you've never tried before, and taking chances ultimately. And that single video inspired me to have kids, try new careers, buy a house in a foreign country, do things which in my mind before felt so uncomfortable to even think about, and now I have all those beautiful things to enjoy. And that leap is the hardest part. Once you actually get over it, once you figure things out, you can enjoy them. There's nothing more valuable to me than waking up in the morning and seeing my beautiful wife, who I love more than anything, and seeing my little son just smiling his little head off for no reason whatsoever. Those things are the most precious things in the world to me, and they all came from taking that little tiny leap, which anybody can take. And I want to know, what have you always wanted to do? Think about it. Think about it now, while you're watching this video. What is the one thing that is on the tip of your tongue that you haven't got around to doing yet? The one single thing. Why are you not doing it today, to some degree? I have absolutely no agenda with this video, apart from asking that question, because it's just something that I think is genuinely interesting to think about. Why are we not doing it today? That's pretty much it. That's all I wanted to share with you today. I hope you found this video helpful, thought-provoking, valuable, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. See you soon.